Hello and welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own life. I'm Paul Dorn, and this is the 10 by 9 Christmas podcast. How lovely to be here with you in darkest December with the Christmas tree lit up like a Christmas tree. I have 4 amazing true stories on this special podcast for you, told December the 6th at Portstewart's Flowerfield Arts Centre.
We couldn't take these presents. Pascal spoke quickly and firmly. We can't not take them, he said. Do not insult the man by refusing his hospitality.
Firstly, it meant that I had to wrap all the presents myself when I eventually got 3 excited children to sleep. And I can only thank my lucky stars that bloody elf on the shelf wasn't about in the late 90s and early noughties.
Hard-working, tolerant, patient and a mischievous sense of humour meant that Jennifer was loved by friends and family. The pupils she taught just loved Mrs. McCullough.
Barry came out of his shop, walking towards me, and he said, "What are you doing?" "I'm fixing that bike for a customer." "Well," I said out loud, "I don't know where you got it, but this is my bike, and I'm not going home without it."
It's always wonderful to bring 10 by 9 to Flowerfield, but even more special when it's Christmas, because let's face it, everyone has a Christmas story, more than any other time of the year. There's something about that intensity of emotion that evokes both joy and sadness for so many of us. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's get going. And first up, as she was on the evening, is Kate Murphy.
I want to tell you, first of all, before I start my story, that I'm coming from a 90th birthday party this afternoon. And it was a very important 90th birthday party. As well, all 90th parties are, but this one was special because the man who's celebrating today is a man in the story, coincidentally. He's a man who's now 90, a Father Pascal Kearney, who currently lives and works on Rathlin Island. And in 1966, he drove myself, my husband, and my toddler son halfway across Nigeria to evacuate us at the beginning of the Biafran War. But this story is 2 years before that, and we knew nothing about what was coming. It's called A Christmas Day in Africa, and it's set in 1964. This was my first Christmas in Africa, and I was homesick. Only the calendar told me it was the 25th of December. I had hung up our cards displaying an incongruous selection of Santas, robins, reindeer, and Victorian ladies in crinolines, but they had bent and fallen over in the humid heat. Holly was unavailable, so I'd garlanded the pictures with greenery, but it had withered overnight. We had no Christmas tree nor fairy lights. Sometimes we didn't even have electricity, for heaven's sake. And candles were for emergencies, not for ornament. I never thought I would dream nostalgically of frost and snow, of brisk walks on the beach in a bracing wind, and of curling up beside a fire in a comfortable woolen sweater. I would never complain again about being cold. That's not true. If I couldn't have snowmen and jingle bells, the least I wanted was a shower and a siesta. Instead, here I was, tramping through the African bush, sweat dripping from my forehead and my T-shirt sticking to my back. The sun burned the scorched grass and turned the baked laterite path into red dust. 5 of us trekked along the narrow path, led by Pascal, an Irish missionary priest. He had somehow acquired a Marks and Spencer's Christmas pudding in a tin, and he invited us to dinner to share it with him. First, however, we had to go for a walk to see the parish and work up an appetite. There was no one on the path, nor did there appear to be anyone in the village when we passed it, except for a few children playing in the dust. It was the siesta hour, and only mad white people would be out in the noonday sun. We greeted the children and would have gone on our way, but news of our arrival had somehow been telegraphed to the sleeping villagers. An old man dashed from a hut, fastening his lapa as he came. He called something to the children, and a small boy detached himself from his play and approached our group. It appeared that he was the translator, and he searched his store of words for the one he wanted. "Welcome," he said eventually. "Welcome, welcome." And he repeated it with many smiles. The old man indicated with hand gestures that we should visit his home. It was a small mud hut with a thatched roof and no windows. Inside there was little light and no furniture. It was a few moments before we were able to make out the form of a woman who was lying on a straw pallet in one corner, feeding a very tiny baby. She moved it from one breast to the other, where it suckled frantically for a few minutes before it began to mewl. Maybe it didn't like being interrupted. One of our party, Nellie, a nurse and a veteran of 18 months in Africa, picked up the baby and rocked him and pronounced him a fine boy. "How old is he?" she asked the mother. "How many days?" And she mimed counting on her fingers. The mother appeared to understand and held up one finger. "Last night, a Christmas baby," Nellie confirmed. The man who had left when we were looking at the baby now returned and had a conversation with his boy translator, who struggled for words. "Head man not Christian, like me," he said. The boy had learnt his meagre English in a mission school then. "Today is a big juju day for you. He has gift." We were dismayed. It was Christmas Day, and we had come unprepared. We had nothing to give. The old man's natural hospitality would not allow visitors to leave empty-handed the way we in our ignorance had come. For the women, he had a basket of small green oranges, which he presented to us with both hands. In the Igbo tradition, he who gives with one hand is a person who gives begrudgingly with only half a heart. These presents were given wholeheartedly. For Pascal, the man held out a small silver coin, a sixpence, cupped in the hollow of his hands. I demurred. Surely he could not afford either oranges nor money. The coins would buy enough cassava in the market for at least a meal. We couldn't take these presents. Pascal spoke quickly and firmly. "We can't not take them," he said. "Do not insult the man by refusing his hospitality." Quickly he peeled an orange, broke it into segments, and shared it round. It was bitter, and the segments had a tough skin, which I had difficulty swallowing. But it seemed to be the right thing to do, for there was much smiling and nodding. Suddenly everyone was laughing and shaking hands and repeating, "Happy Christmas." The old man joined in, hesitantly at first, as he learned the words which we repeated slowly for him. "Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas." I was no longer homesick. It was Christmas.
Kate, thank you for that heartwarming story, and thanks too for getting us off to such a great start that night. What a high bar you've set, and to be fair, everyone met it. And to prove it, here's our next story. It comes from 10 by 9 regular Gloria O'Connor.
All I want for Christmas is, well, what about a wee bit of help around here? Do I have to do everything? And don't forget that old nugget, nothing gets done right unless you do it yourself. Truly, a woman's work is never done. Does all that sound familiar? And isn't it true what they say about no one being as surprised as Dad when the children open their presents on Christmas morning? Mind you, my husband and children would probably tell you a different story. No doubt they would tell you that all offers of help were brushed aside as I rushed around insisting on doing everything myself. I'm not the most organised of people for most of the year, but when getting ready for family holidays or Christmas, I turn into a deranged control freak. Or at least I used to when the children were young. Christmas was prepared for with military precision, with lists and costings for presents in the Christmas food shop. I was usually working right up until Christmas Eve too, so a frozen turkey was bought well in advance. No time for queuing outside the butcher's on Christmas Eve morning. When my children were young, my husband was still working as a psychiatric nurse in Grantia Hospital. And for 3 years in a row, he was working night duty on Christmas Eve night. The first year I felt sorry for him. The second year, not so much. And the third year, I began to suspect a cunning plan on his part. Was he really requesting to work Christmas Eve in a psychiatric hospital rather than spend it with me? This working night shift presented several problems. Firstly, it meant that I had to wrap all the presents myself when I eventually got 3 excited children to sleep. Now, if I was doing it all over again, I don't think I would wrap the presents. But it's one of those things that when you do it once, they expect it every year. And I can only thank my lucky stars that that bloody elf on the shelf wasn't about in the late 90s and early noughties. There was also the problem of having to prep much of the dinner the day before, not to mention keeping 3 now even more excited children quiet on Christmas Day while their father slept. That, of course, was near impossible. So as soon as the presents were opened and breakfast was over, I packed the children and their most portable presents into the car and took them to my mother's house. Poor Granny. I did try to leave the noisiest toys at home. On the 3rd year of hubby work on Christmas Eve night, it had been a particularly stressful week. Work was busy, and I was working right up until Christmas Eve. The toys were all bought, but were still in the boot of my car, where they had actually been for the last few weeks. A couple of times I forgot myself and opened the boot to throw in the school bags, then hastily closed it again before anyone caught a glimpse of a guitar and an Action Man tent and numerous other bits and pieces. A few nights before Christmas, I managed to move everything into the garage. The children were warned not to go into the garage because there was a big dog in there. I always regretted that lie because I thought it might make them afraid of dogs, but thankfully it didn't seem to. I picked the children up from the childminders on Christmas Eve and rushed home to get preparation underway for Christmas dinner and all the other chores that us poor women have to do. Hubby was getting very little sympathy this year as he headed out to work the night shift. My son, who was then 4, had fallen asleep on the sofa around tea time, and I knew from experience that this was not a good thing, as he would then be up running about half the night. So I bit the bullet and tried to wake him up. Now, at that time, he was experiencing occasional night terrors, and it turned out that waking him from his sleep before he was ready was not a good idea. We watched helplessly as poor David ran around the room, wide-eyed and terrified, screaming, "Shoot me now, shoot me now." It really was awful. It took us about half an hour to calm him down and restore some normality. But eventually, with the children all in bed and sleeping soundly, I poured myself a small glass of wine and started bringing in the toys from the garage. That was the year when it seemed that everything had to be assembled. 2 desks for the girls and an Action Man tent for David. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I gave up on the plan to fully assemble the desks. Santa was very busy after all, and he didn't have time to assemble all the presents. Sometimes he needed a little help from Mum and Dad, or at least that's what I would be telling them in the morning. The Action Man tent, however, was fully assembled, and I crawled inside and lay down and closed my eyes. And yes, I may have fallen asleep. It was very pleasant and peaceful in there. And now I know you're thinking that that's how I was found in the morning, fast asleep with my feet sticking out the door of the tent. But no, I dozed briefly, wrapped the rest of the presents and got off to bed. At about 7 o'clock, I woke to the sound of the phone ringing. This was in the days before mobile phones were common. And by the time I had registered what the sound was and hurried downstairs to answer, it had, of course, rung off. Using 1471 told me that it was a withheld number, which was a little strange. Probably my husband ringing from work, I thought, although I couldn't think why he might be ringing me. I rang the hospital and asked to speak to him. "Oh, Robbie isn't here right now," I was told by the nurse who answered the phone. I tried asking where he was, but the answers were rather evasive. I was really starting to get worried now. I went back to bed, but of course, had no chance of sleeping. I was definitely getting really worried now, and the children would be getting up very soon. It was only a few minutes later that I heard a loud knock on the door and really started to panic. Glancing out of the window first, I saw a police car pulled up outside the house. Shaking with fear now, I ran downstairs and opened the front door to find my husband looking rather sheepish between two burly police officers. It turned out that a couple of hours earlier, he had looked out the window of the ward at work to see his car rolling gently down the avenue outside. He tried running after it, but the engine started and off the thieves went with his precious Vauxhall Cavalier. If any of you have ever owned a Vauxhall in those days, you would know that it wouldn't have been any great challenge to the thieves to get into the vehicle and start it. If you owned a Vauxhall, the key would literally open any other car of the same model. A few weeks earlier, my husband had gotten into the wrong car in the shopping centre car park. His key had easily opened a similar blue Vauxhall, and he only realised when the owner came running over to challenge him. Luckily, the owner saw the funny side, having done something similar himself. My husband had reported the theft to the police, of course, and they must have felt sorry for him, and in the spirit of Christmas, and in the absence of taxis, gave him a lift home. Of course, I was very relieved that he was okay. But when he said, "Do you think you'll be able to keep them quiet for a while?" followed by, "What time will dinner be at?" he knew by my expression that he would never be working Christmas Eve night again. And he never did.
Thanks so much, Gloria. It was great to have you back at the 10 by 9 mic. Have a wonderful Christmas. Now, just a quick thank you to everyone who helps keep 10 by 9 going with donations. Some of you give via Patreon and some donate to StoryPig at our live events. Either way, thank you. 10 by 9 is always free and always will be, so it really helps to keep us going. If you're interested in making a Christmas gift, just look us up on Patreon. Okay, let's get back to the stories, and he was our only first-timer at Portstewart, but what a story he had to tell. Here's David McCullough.
2 years ago, on this exact date, I was in the cardiac unit in the Causeway Hospital. Almost every day, a nurse would take me in a wheelchair to visit my wife, who was in a general medical ward on the same corridor. Jennifer and I had met at a student dance in February 1965, about 6 months after her mother had passed away, and just about 4 years after she'd lost her father as well. Undaunted, she qualified as a primary school teacher. We were married in 1968 with 3 children, with 4 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Hard-working, tolerant, patient, empathic, and a mischievous sense of humour meant that Jennifer was loved by friends and family and held in high esteem by her work colleagues. The pupils she taught just loved Mrs. McCullough. Jennifer's faced many challenges following her early retirement. 5 breast cancer operations, the removal of 2 cataracts, and a blood clot developing while on holiday, which could have been fatal on the flight home. In 2017, her doctor referred her to a consultant for suspected Parkinson's disease. When his diagnosis was confirmed, it amplified the struggles she already faced. The signature tremor had little impact, except in pressure situations, such as picking up a cup. But her speech became slurred and her sleep fragmented. Hallucinations, magnified at times by her medication, forced her to give up driving, and her chances of falling increased considerably. Daily chores and personal care became hazardous without assistance. We moved to our holiday home in Portstewart in 2020, knowing that the support services here would be superior to those we experienced in Belfast. Caring for Jennifer 24/7 proved to me that I was not Superman, and the stress of coping became more apparent. A week before the time we were both in hospital, I had scary chest pains while washing the car. But after 36 hours in A&E, I had insisted on going home. My younger son had to come up from Saintfield to look after his mum during my emergency. That 36 hours in A&E had unknowingly given me COVID, which I in turn unknowingly passed on to Jennifer. And within a week, her condition deteriorated, forcing her admission to the Causeway Hospital. When I went to visit her the following day, she was uncomfortable. And when I looked for assistance at the nurses' station, they put me in a wheelchair and took me to triage. So that's how we both ended up in different wards on the same corridor. On my second discharge a week later, going home to an empty house was challenging. Lying awake one night, a call from the hospital in the early hours asked me to come in right away to discuss DNR with the lead doctor. DNR, do not resuscitate. In the past, Jennifer frequently said, "Shoot me if I get like that," in response to hearing about someone we knew being gravely ill, or when watching a similar situation on television. She would have hated to be relying heavily on oxygen, antibiotic drips, being fed through a tube, needing catheters and cannulas, and relying for mobility on a wheelchair and the services of wonderful nurses. Yet that described exactly her condition at that time. I suppose she had the wisdom to see that the quality of life is probably more important than prolonging it in circumstances where the inevitable was imminent. Her suffering was compounded by her confusion and thinking and difficulty in speaking. All of this met the parameters of DNR as Jennifer and the medical staff understood it. Jennifer had a deep personal faith, making her compassionate, caring, and always seeing the best in all the people she met. This shone out when she worked as a volunteer in an Abbeyfield home in the Castlereagh Road in Belfast. She also enabled us to sponsor some children in Uganda through their schooling, through the Fields of Life programme. And one of those children has recently become a graduate teacher in his community. Now that Jennifer needed care and support, she always expressed her gratitude to all who were doing the best to ease her suffering. When the doctor said she might not make it to Christmas, palliative care was flagged as a possibility. Visits from friends and family increased during that ping-pong time of optimism and pessimism. Talking to her was encouraged, and we all realised how much meaning could be conveyed by a smile, a frown, squeeze of a finger, a shrug, even a gentle movement of an arm, black and blue from repeated injections and cannula insertions. On Christmas Eve, she uttered what turned out to be her last question, close to the ear of her older sister. Am I going to die? I have no recollection of her sister's answer. Having made it through Christmas, we were told to expect the worst by New Year. Palliative care began on the 27th of December. A Macmillan nurse and our minister, the Reverend Malcolm, supported all of us day and night into the new year. On the evening of the 7th of January, I took the 10-minute drive home to freshen up and change my clothes. As I opened the front door, a phone call from the hospital informed me that Jennifer had slipped away peacefully. Linda, the Macmillan nurse, and Malcolm both said this happened frequently, as if the person wanted to be alone at the end. So please savour every precious moment with friends and family this Christmas. Take a moment perhaps to remember those who once sat at your table, who gave value to your life and brought love with their presence. I will continue to visit Jennifer's memorial tree here in the grounds of Flowerfield, fittingly close to the children's play area. I will thank her for 55 plus years of love and togetherness and for making me a better person than I would otherwise have been. I will tell her that on dark, lonely, sleepless nights, when stars of memory pierce the darkness, shining in the greyness of grief, a coin spins of love and loss. Memories born in love, loss felt from times no longer shared. That coin spins on, my reminder of a love shared, a love never lost.
Thank you so much, David. That was heartbreaking and wonderful and touching and incredibly humbling. And thank you for introducing us to Jennifer. That's really lovely. When David sent that in, originally he said, will this do? I was sitting in a cafe in South Belfast, as I mentioned earlier. That was one of the stories that had me in floods of tears. So thank you. It was beautiful. I know it's hard to see the audience's face when you're up here. I was sitting there, I could see them all. I'm sure you could feel the support that was coming from them. Thank you so much. There is something very special about the 10 by 9 audience, and David, you really had them gripped. What a wonderful story. Thank you. Your story was a blessing. And I have no idea what they think of me in that Belfast cafe. Now, if you listen regularly, you'll know that normally I only include 3 stories on a podcast, which is more than enough given the extremely high quality. But as it's Christmas, here's a gift. An extra story for you. And believe me, you'll thank me for it. She's been a long-time supporter of 10 by 9, so it was a joy to welcome back Maria McCloskey.
This story is called Christmas in July. Una Henry, my cousin, a daughter of Kathleen and Artie, a sister, a mother, a niece, an aunt, a friend, died aged 40 on the 17th of April 2021, just over a year after she received a diagnosis of stage 4 cervical cancer. Like anyone who's experienced cancer, Una's diagnosis and passing rocked her family's world, and I know they feel it to this day. I distinctly recall one of the last times I spent with Una before she got that devastating diagnosis. It was right here in Portstewart for our other cousin's wedding at Harry's shack. That night, 3 generations of our extended family partied on the beach, created a new version of the Waves of Tory, rocked the boat, and generally had the kind of blast that you have when there is that excuse of a wedding wane or wake to all too infrequently come together. Una was at the centre of it all. She was creating the waves, she was steering the boat, she was taking the selfies, and she was persuading everyone to join in the fun. Una was always full of fun. In the summer of 2020, when Una was in the throes of her treatment, I posted on my Facebook page that I wanted to buy a second-hand bike, and I asked if any of my family or friends knew where I might get one. Soon after, my phone pinged with a message from Una. "Maria, take my bike. It's just sitting there." My initial reluctance of accepting the offer was met with Una's typical matter-of-fact approach. "Just take it," she said. "It's not like I'll be on it again." At that point, I gratefully accepted, not wanting to prolong the awkward but honest conversation any further. I decided to call the bike Henry. I always remember my granda on the other side of my family calling Una Henry Una, and it making the both of us giggle as children every time he said it. In the months after, I had many fun-filled days with Henry, cycling to Lisburn and getting the train back, taking on holidays and making lots of plans. After Una's passing in 2021, Henry became one of my most cherished possessions, although admittedly it became more of a mode of transport towards the latter couple of years rather than the fun outings I used it for in the beginning. Earlier this year, one lovely April evening, I cycled into Belfast city centre on Henry to meet my good friend, Lorraine. As I looked up and down the street of the place we chose to eat in, not seeing a solid structure to lock Henry to, I opted for railings around an eatery where people were sitting outside having food and drinks. I was just 2 doors down the street and I poked my head out a couple of times just to check it was okay. When it came time to go home, we came out of the venue and started to walk towards the bike. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The bike was exactly where I chained it up, but the handlebars were completely different. As I stepped closer, my heart sank. Henry was gone, and in its place was someone else's bike. The tears sprang from my eyes. I bawled like a child as Lorraine comforted me, explaining to the guy whose bike we were now suspiciously staring at that my bike had been there, but had clearly been taken. I was utterly devastated, as was Lorraine, who knew how much Henry meant to me. We called the police and hopelessly drove around the streets of Belfast city centre for the next half hour. While I waited for the police to call out, through sobs and tears, I composed a post for Nextdoor, a local neighbourhood app. I had one photograph of me on the bike and I posted it with a message saying, "I know how much of a long shot this is, but if you see this bike around Belfast or see it for sale, please get in touch." The policeman who called to my house later that night confirmed my fears. "Bike theft is like a pandemic," he said. "We'll log it and keep an eye out, but don't get your hopes up." Nevertheless, I vowed to do whatever I could. I created alerts for similar bikes for sale on Gumtree, Facebook Marketplace and eBay, which I checked every day in the weeks and months after, but there was no sign. One evening, a few months later, in early June, I noticed that I had a message on the Nextdoor app. I hadn't really kept an eye on it since I had initially posted, but when I clicked in, I saw the following, which was sent the previous evening, saying, "Hi Maria, I think I've seen your bike. Give me a call." I hurriedly dialed the number and said, "Hi, this is Maria. I just saw your message on Nextdoor." Over the next few minutes, Barry, as we'll call him, told me he owns a bicycle repair shop, how a man came in recently with a bike, asked how much it was worth, and how this man, we'll call him the wee thief, how he gave Barry the absolute creeps and he felt something wasn't right. When Barry scrolled through 3 months' worth of notices on Nextdoor later that evening, That's a lot of missing cats and anti-social behaviour. He found my post. This was huge. Why would this have happened, I thought, if it wasn't going to lead to something? And from that moment on, I was convinced Henry and I would be reunited. A few weeks later, I was sitting in a meeting in Dublin when my phone started ringing. The name flashed up, Barry the bike shop hero. That's how I'd saved his number. And I said to my colleague, sorry, I have to take this, and I ended the virtual meeting without waiting for a reply. I answered to hear Barry say, he's back. Over the next 15 minutes, I frantically messaged everyone I could think of who works in Belfast city centre. 2 partners from a law firm I worked in 5 years earlier, my friend Stephen, who drives for a living, and someone I'd met a few times who I knew worked about 2 minutes from the bike shop. He answered. I explained the situation as best I could, and within a matter of minutes, he was on his way. Alas, he was about 5 minutes too late. I called Barry the bike shop hero for a debrief. He's a smart man, is our Barry. Even though he knew it was a puncture, Barry told me he put some air in the tyre and said, see how you get on, mate, knowing the wee thief would be back. The next time Barry was open for business after the July holidays, Lorraine and I coordinated our stakeouts. We were so hopeful, almost giddy with excitement. This was it. Henry was coming back to me. Lorraine took the morning shift, I took the afternoon, and I sat there in a coffee shop with the window looking out on the bike shop. But a few hours later, after closing time and no sign, I had to give up. I went back home a little deflated and worried that he'd gone elsewhere for the repair. At about 5 to 1 the next day, after a morning full of meetings, my phone rang again, and those familiar words. He's back, said Barry. But I need to fix it this time. I've told him to come back at 3 o'clock. As I hung up the phone, I was practically in the process of opening the front door to my mummy, who had just arrived to join me for lunch. To greet her, I blurted out something along the lines of, Mummy, I need to tell you something. Una's bike was stolen a few months ago, but it's been found. We need to go now. A bit shell-shocked, but in her usual let's not get too excited style, my mummy asked no questions and turned on her heel to get into my car. As we approached the shop, I saw him. There was Henry, in all his distinctive white and blue framed glory, same blue seat cover, different pedals, but critically, my bike chain still wrapped around the frame, completely intact. When I approached the door of the bike shop, I saw that Barry was talking to someone else. I took no chances and started to unlock my chain to secure it and make sure the bike couldn't move another inch. Barry came out of his shop, walking towards me, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he whispered, "Play along," under his breath, as other customers and bystanders looked on. "I'm fixing that bike for a customer." "Well," I said out loud, "I don't know where you got it, but this is my bike, and I'm not going home without it." I called the police, but couldn't get through. I knew I couldn't leave Barry in the lurch. I'd have to confront the wee thief myself. So we sat there, me and my mummy, on double yellow lines, staring at the bike shop like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, waiting to make our move. As we waited, the Sundance Kid decided to go and get a couple of coffees. Lunchtime had come and gone, and this sting operation was thirsty work. Just as she entered a nearby coffee shop, I saw Barry coming out of his shop, walking towards Henry with a man by his side. Instinctively, I got out of the car and walked towards them. Just as I heard Barry say, "She said it was her bike," I exclaimed with as much conviction and confidence as I could muster, "Excuse me, that's my bike, and I'm taking it home with me." A middle-aged man with a tinge of red in his hair, shorts, striped T-shirt and black gilet responded in a bit of a startle. "Is that your bike, love?" "I knew that fella I bought it off was dodgy." "Is that your bike, love? Right enough." After a bit of back and forth, including a few animated protestations that, "Here, I didn't steal your bike, love," And after me briefly explaining what the bike meant to me, he eventually said, well, here, I'm glad you got it back. But here, I didn't steal your bike, love. At one point, the Sundance kid who had by now arrived back with the coffees was walking towards us, rightly concerned that her daughter might be about to get clocked, but promptly turned on her heel when she saw the suspected wee thief, we'll now call him, reach out a hand to shake mine. All those lines from the movies, all my gusto and bravado, it doesn't really happen like that in real life. But it didn't matter. The feeling of adrenaline and elation was something special. I cycled back up the Armour Road on the still punctured tyre, whooping and cheering and singing, "It's my bike, it's my bike." And as I came downstairs the next morning, seeing Henry sitting in my front hallway, it felt slap bang in the middle of July like the best Christmas ever. And as if the Christmas morning feeling couldn't get any better, I opened my laptop to catch up on the work I'd missed from the day before. And I immediately stumbled, for the first time in well over 2 years, across a funny TikTok video that Una made when she was going through her treatment. Una had a hand in this, I have no doubt. It's like she gave me 2 brilliant gifts and a little adventure thrown in for good measure. I sincerely hope Henry will be in my life for many more adventures, and I promise that it will be used now in Una's memory exclusively for fun.
Go, Maria. Wow. That was like a true crime podcast. Fantastic. What a hero that Barry was. Fantastic. I hope you'll let him know that the people of Portstewart know what a great guy he is. Thank you. And now all the podcast listeners know as well. What a hero. And who would have cast Maria McCloskey as an action hero? Well done you, Maria. How lovely it was to meet Una's mum, who was there to hear that wonderful tribute, along with other family members. Thank you all. And that's it for this Christmas podcast. I'll try to get some of our black box Christmas stories out before the big day, so watch out for those. You can keep up with all our upcoming events and themes by having a look at our website, that's 10by9.com. Plan your 2026 visit to the black box if you've not been yet. All the dates are there. 10by9 is on the socials naturally. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook and or Instagram. And you can get in touch via email at 10by9belfast@gmail.com. So get in touch. I love hearing from you. Thanks to everyone who helped make 10by9 of Flowerfield happen. Fran and Adam and all the team. Thanks too to the fantastic 10by9 audience. You made everyone, including me, feel so supported. And thanks to all the people who shared their story that evening at Portstewart, but especially Kate Murphy, Gloria O'Connor, David McCullough and Maria McCloskey. I'm Paul Dorn and I'll be back with another podcast soon. But for now, bye-bye and have a wonderful Christmas.